This is Hospitality Huddles, brought to you by Auden Hospitality, the podcast that challenges hoteliers to think differently about F&B to create outlets that guests will love. Every episode, we will speak to the people who are embracing a different mindset to look for opportunities to stand out from the crowd, sharing tips and takeaways to help you get uncomfortable, change your outlook, and see F&B in a whole new way. So let's not wait any longer and dive straight into today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hospitality Huddles. And today, really excited to talk about something a little bit different to F&B, but talking really about meeting and events and how that kind of contributes to the whole proposition within the hotel. And joining me is a C&E, M&E expert, Mandi Graziano. Mandi, really pleased to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me. It's awesome to see you and to chat with your audience.
Yeah. Now, the last time we chatted on something of this format, I was sat in a pub and we were having the chat on Adventures for Business. So I'm a little upset that you're in your office today and you haven't gone to find the local bar to have a chat in.
I have no drink. I have a decaf coffee, which is even more disappointing. I'm so sorry.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. Listen, Mandi, we always open the show with the same question to everyone, and it's, what does hospitality mean to you? So over to you. Tell us what you think.
Yeah, hospitality for me has changed over the years, in the 20 plus years I've been in this wacky and wild industry. And I think where it sits for me today is what hospitality means to me is this wonderfully welcoming experience that you have, whether it is to a hotel, to a restaurant, to a bar, to a venue, to a nightclub. It's that smile and greet, that hospitality one-on-one, how you make people feel, and what you experience and you remember when you walk away. So hospitality for me is very intuitive, and it's very, what can you do to make it linger and really mark those moments and those experiences.
Yeah, that's a really nice word, linger, because I think it's, for me, hospitality is a lot about how people walk away from wherever they've been in your establishment and kind of always remember a little touch point around it, or they go and something's been that good that they go and tell friends around it. And I think it's that leaving that mark on the guest is a real huge part of hospitality, isn't it?
Ah, I so agree. It's funny when you say that. This story instantly comes to mind of, there's a hotel in California. It's called Monarch Beach Resort. It's a Waldorf Astoria hotel. And my husband and I went there for the weekend. We brought our dog. They were dog friendly. We got to the room. They had a couple amenities for my husband and I, which were nice, but the real amenities were for our dog, Luca, our golden doodle dog, Luca. She had a beautiful bed, and they had beautiful biscuits for her and a couple toys. And then when we walked around the property, we were very conscious of, like, she's a dog that just loves people. And we had to just, she's not the dog that's going to protect you from a burglar. She's jumping into your arms, right? And not everybody wants a 70-pound dog jumping into your arms. So we were being very conscious of that. And we would sit down in the restaurants there, and Luca would come and sit at our feet, and we played backgammon, and the servers and the guests would come up and ask Luca if she wanted anything, and they would pet her. And it's like, it sounds so silly, but taking care of us was one thing, but taking care of our dog when sometimes people are uncomfortable with that was another thing. And so I will always remember that in my mind. I always have a vision of her sitting at my feet while my husband and I drank espresso martinis and played backgammon overlooking the ocean. I mean, it was just a memory for sure. So you're right, marking that moment and just that lingering experience.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that experience a bit later, because I think it's probably one of the things that's changed the most over probably the last 5 years with the pandemic. But if people don't know Mandi and never heard of you before, do you want to just share a little bit about you and your experience and where you are today?
Yeah, wow. There's a lot of dimension. I'm a nerd. I'm a hospitality nerd at heart. I mean, my very first hospitality job was when I was 12 years old. I worked at a 45,000 square foot banquet and conference center. I know it had to be illegal. It had to be against some sort of labor law to be 12 years old and working at a banquet and conference center. in Cleveland, Ohio. And on Saturdays, I was the hostess. So I would take, those little letters, the old school white plastic
Yep.
letters in the black felt, and I would put the names of the guests, and it was all weddings. So there was 2 names. It took forever. So it was 8 banquet rooms. I'd make the signs. I'd welcome everybody to the banquet hall. And then Sundays I would go back and I'd clean glasses and I would vacuum. And I don't know about you, but like I learned a lot about vacuums at 12 years old that break when you're vacuuming 45,000 square feet of space. So it all started in Cleveland, Ohio. It's in my blood. I've worked in restaurants, I've worked in ice cream shops, and then, fast forward many years, I feel like I've had every hotel job under the sun, from catering manager, sales manager, conference manager, director of sales and marketing, vice president of sales and marketing, and for many brands, Hard Rock, Starwood, Marriott, we've many brands over the years, Caesars
Mm.
Entertainment. And where I sit today for the last 14 years is I'm on the other side of the business where I'm a buyer and I help people find hotels and venues all over the world for their conferences. I negotiate pricing, food and beverage pricing, sleeping room pricing, guest room rates, all of that stuff. And I turn it over to people to plan. And if my clients, they don't have a planner, I have a whole team of meeting planners that can execute it for them. So, the first part of my career, I was in hotel operations at many hotels with my high heels in the back of the house, getting stuck in those plastic mats with the little holes in it. And then in the last 14 years, I've been a buyer where I'm giving business to hotels all over the world and all different types of hotels. It can be, limited and select serve all the way to some of the most luxury properties in the world.
Yeah, I started in banqueting as well. And I think
Mhm.
I always go back when people ask me the story about why I ended up in hotels. I always go back to that first time. I was 16, so I was a bit behind you. I was
Mm.
late to the game. But it was
Mhm.
that whole adrenaline of banquets and turning banquets around for meetings the next day and then turning them for the banquet at the night. And, I was lucky that I worked in big banqueting hotels most of my career. And there's something about meeting and events and banqueting and making it happen that's just, I don't know, there's a buzz around it that I definitely couldn't walk away from when I decided to go into it full time. There's something special, isn't there? Especially about when you're talking about weddings and you're talking about how you're making an impact on people's lives that they'll always remember. And, same for conference and events when you get big exhibitions and things. It can be really unique, can't it? The feeling that you get.
It's a disease, right? Like, it's like
Mm.
that dopamine center, like,
Yeah.
"Give me more. I want this one went great. This one didn't go great. How do we
Yeah.
make it better? How do you engage the staff?" And, I agree with you about the weddings and the social things, but then there's also, I did the droid launch. Like, that
Mm.
was so cool. That was so many years ago,
Yep.
and we hired a bunch of little people in these really cool green outfits to be the elevator people. It's like if you think about on the pharmaceutical, Lunesta, I did
Mm.
the Lunesta launch where it was like one of the very first sleep aids that got approved by the FDA. So you think about, it's not just those personal memorable moments, it's those meetings and events that are moving large groups of people life forward, whether it is a drug discovery meeting that you're actually being a part of and you're helping them find the right place for it, or whether it is a really awesome association. I work with a organization called the Association of Child Life Professionals, and like these humans are the best humans ever. They are the social workers and the nurses in pediatrics that are helping your kids understand, okay, here's why you're getting a shot, and here's what will happen, and here's why you have to eat your food. Like, they're physically in the hospital. So, like, helping them be better at their job and helping them improve the lives of all the children around them. There's always an opportunity for somebody to help somebody else, whether it is a personal event or a professional event. So yeah, I'm with you. it's a
Yeah,
disease for
for
sure.
sure. There's
And it's not
definitely an
for
addiction.
everybody, but I think it's for us for sure.
100%. And then
Yeah.
you've got it there in the background, but sales tales. You left that bit out when you were up
I
near
did.
the
It's right
screen.
here. Here she is.
It's
Here she
there.
is.
So I heard a tip that the audiobook was phenomenal. So it's on my Spotify list to go
Good.
after the current read. But tell people more about that and the coaching that you do, because I saw an amazing video the other day of that you shared on a group that we're both involved in, and it looked phenomenal.
Yeah. So, Sales Tales, The Hustle, Humor, and Lessons of a Life in Sales. It's a hilarious business book that I wrote a couple years ago. And it's one of those things I always knew I was going to write a book. I never knew what it was going to be about. I thought my mom would be the only one that bought it or looked at it. It ended up accidentally being a bestseller in all 5 categories in Amazon. And the publisher said to me, your book is going to take on a life of its own. You just don't know where it goes. I didn't understand where it meant, what she meant by that. And then 3 years later, here we are where people are still buying it by the hundreds, they're still quoting things, they're getting stories from it. And it is mostly hospitality because that's where I cut my teeth. So it's a ton of fun hospitality stories, but it goes in the order of a traditional sale. So it covers prospecting, networking, making the pitch, making a proposal, closing the deal, building relationships. And then I have a whole chapter on disaster selling, which shows stories about, how to rebuild your business through COVID, through the 2008 auto crisis, and through the September 11th crash. So I put all these stories together. I invited people, mentors, and people that I love and respect in the hospitality industry to tell a couple of their stories. So they're not just my stories. I'm telling everybody else's stories, my stories. And then, in my sales coaching business, and geez Louise, I've been doing that for about 17 years. My sales coaching business, I coach sales teams of all industries. So in the book, I pepper in different stories of sales because I think in hospitality, we get so mired and so siloed in like, this is just how we do it. But I have found success with doing things at a different iteration, right? So looking at how retail is doing something and applying that to hospitality, looking at beauty or manufacturing or public relations, how these different industries are doing things and iterating it within hospitality and making it better. So you'll see all of that in the book. It's funny. And I'm really proud of it. And I'll keep writing forever. I'll keep writing till they tell me to stop writing because it was a big joy. And I think it's made some impact on people and it's made a big impact on me of just that lesson of sharing your story. I
Mm.
think we all have, I'm sure you have a ton of stories. I know your audience has a ton of stories and we don't share them enough. When you
Yeah.
share, you're helping people, but you also might be inspiring somebody to share their story and share their story.
Yeah, I think there's no other industry like this for different stories that you can get, and I don't think I've met someone in the industry yet where you don't learn something really crazy about what they have done or some of the events they've carried out or restaurants they've operated and openings and things like that until people tell the stories. And I think we're both advocates for jumping on and telling it, and I think it's amazing that to see it in a book and share something in terms of sales, because it is one of those from experience of working in hotels, it's something I think especially now people are kind of taking a little bit too seriously in terms of
Yes.
targets, unachievable targets, or things just being stretched, business being kind of saturated to an extent, new hotels opening with newer product and things like that. And it's to put it in a humorous way kind of brings that seriousness out. And I always look at it sometimes like sports. If you have a salesperson who isn't taking it too seriously, isn't under too much pressure, they become a lot more confident in terms of closing a deal because it's not as pressurized to get it over the line. Same as when you're in sports, you can tell the players who are under pressure and aren't under pressure. And I just think doing that in a humorous way is an amazing way to get it over to people.
Yeah, and we're in hospitality. Like it's all the H's, hospitality,
Mm.
humor. We have to have fun. Like people, it's hard to travel and get somewhere at 3 in the morning and you arrive to a front desk person who's a grumpalumpicus. You're grumpalumpicus because you're exhausted and you've been traveling for 20 hours. So hospitality is fun. And when everybody is having fun along the way, it eases the pain of travel sometimes. It makes it more memorable. So I'm a big advocate of bringing more fun and more humor into all spaces of our industry for sure.
Yeah. Now we're working on a white paper at the minute with hot stats, and we're looking at all sorts of data across the UK and the US. And the reason that I reached out to you and was like, Mandy, we've got to get on a podcast, we've got to speak about this, is I've been looking at stats over the last 5 years quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things that I saw was around meetings and events, banqueting, conference, however you cut it up in terms of acronyms. And what we saw from there in terms of the UK was that conferences have really gone back year on year, and it's starting to really impact profitability. But in the US as well, we're seeing since 2019, pre-pandemic, that sales are behind of overall total revenue of the hotel. How's the pandemic affected meetings and events from what you're seeing with your clients and hotel partners? And I guess from there, it'd be really great to kind of look at what the new generation or the new buyer is now looking for in an experience, because it feels to me like there's something underpinning the fact that meetings haven't moved forwards in 5 years.
Yeah, so I'm going to dispute some of the stats because I read them and I mildly agree with them, but I think there are some factors at play that we really need to be aware of, right? So
Yep.
2020, 2021, so many meetings were lifted and shifted.
Yep.
And 22 and 23 were already pre-booked. So meetings were lifted and shifted from 2020, 2021 to 24, 25, first quarter 26. So
Okay.
on a P&L, it may not look like new business is booked because it was shifted from the previous to the future, right? So I think there's that piece. There's also what's super interesting is like, I've had people say, gosh, meetings are going down. Like as a buyer, I am getting like non-stop promotions right now. Like, we got to fill our hotel. We got to do this. We got to do like, that's how I know that meetings are down. And
Yep.
for the listeners, I'm doing my air quotes here. I don't know if meetings are down as much as we think they are. I think asset managers and owners, rightly so, saw the big jumps in business, whether that was leisure travel or wholesale travel, or maybe even some meetings travel. They saw those jumps in 21, 22, and parts of 23. So when they set the goals, they set these goals so high for the end of 23, 24, and even 25 that the goals aren't matching where things really are. Like, I think we're actually just level setting right now. I think we're right sizing things. So I'd encourage anybody looking at your numbers, looking at your P&L, make sure you're parsing out your BT and your actual events. That would be my first thing. Now, for meetings being down, yes, people are being conscious about how they travel, but they're being conscious with the number of people. So maybe in the past, a company might have booked a large company-wide meeting for 500 people. They're not necessarily sending all 500 now. They're doing quarterly business reviews, so smaller meetings, more regional. And that is something I've seen on the rise coming out of COVID for sure, is some of these bigger meetings aren't as big. They're, instead of one big meeting, they're doing 4 meetings throughout the country, throughout the world. They're chopping it up, right? So that can skew the data a little bit too. And then at these meetings, instead of like this, 3-night peak, 4-day meeting, a 3.5-day meeting, it's just 2 nights and people are in and out. And it's closer to an airport, or it's within 20 minutes of an airport, so it makes travel a little bit easier. So I think the data, just like all data, it can be sliced and diced in a lot of different ways. I think meetings appear to be down because some of the goals were inflated based on the revenge travel that happened. And I do think that will right size itself over the next year and a half or so. But I think coming out of COVID, because of the distributed workforce that's everywhere, a lot of people have been hired and they've never met their boss. They don't know, there's no company headquarters anymore. So I think the new types of meetings that are coming about are really interesting, and the new types are a little bit smaller, like the quarterly biggest business review. I've had a lot of people do camps. It's not a true camp, but they're calling it camp. It's like
Mm.
a new hire camp or executive leadership camp, and really it's just bringing people together to meet for the first time and actually do a team building. So that's something that's changed coming out of COVID. And I think companies have a big desire to continue that retention and that recruitment for this remote workforce. And the only way you can do that is by face-to-face meetings. So
Mm.
I don't know if I would panic just yet. There's a lot of different types of ways to go after the meetings. And like I know you and I had talked before we started the show, there's a huge opportunity to really ask the question of your customer, like, hey, what are you doing to bring your team together? How are you doing the camp experience? When was the last time you met with your customers? So I think there's a lot of questions that salespeople and sales teams can ask. And sometimes you've got to put the idea in the customer's mind because they're not thinking about it. So I'll give you an example of that. Last month, HPN Global, the company that I do business with, we did a top customer event and it was a wellness event. And we flew, our top 20 customers of my base from all over the world to San Diego to do a wellness event where we were sharing, here's how you add more wellness to your personal life. Here's how you incorporate more wellness to your meetings. Now, this is a new type of event, right? This is an event you can do for internally for employees, for executives, externally for customers or investors. But we intentionally did that, one, to celebrate our customers, but two, to show them this is an event that has a lot of content, that has a lot of give back. And if you're a little bit nervous about the boondoggle event where everyone's getting crazy, like consider this wellness type event. So I also think it's on us or people at the hotel to inspire people with new types of events as well and just drop that suggestion to them because they're out there. People just aren't thinking about them as much.
Yeah, and I think why I wanted to reach out to you on this subject is what you've got an amazing experience in is dealing with you're dealing with clients every day. You're dealing with the people
Yeah.
who are going to be the guys who are looking for venues. So if you're a hotelier listening to this, it's amazing value of someone who's there on the client side, but you also understand what the hotel operations need to deliver. And when I was thinking about the show and I was preparing, I was really wondering whether the fact now that offices of the people who are still in offices are becoming so modern now in terms of building meeting rooms and Zoom pods and studios and things like that that go with it. Are hotels as in the traditional form of convention centers and meeting event spaces? Are they standing up to what people are building in their own offices? And I'll give you an example. I was in Samsung offices here in London the other day, and they've got an amazing like co-working space for their
Yeah.
people that have all got kind of pods on there where you can charge all your phones and do what you need to do. They've got Zoom pods where their people can go in and they can have private chats, and they've got like little meeting rooms as well. And they've got really cool, almost like university lecture seating. And this was all in Samsung offices. I then went to a hotel client of mine and I watched around the conference and events just trying to get in my mind. And it was meeting room, carpet, TV on the wall, AV, which is quite difficult to use quite a bit. Like there wasn't some of the modern elements there. And I just wonder whether hotels need to start looking at capex and going, do you know what, actually, what are people looking after? Because it feels like we kind of not moved forwards in the last few years as well as people have come back to the office. Is that something you're seeing clients directing in terms of the style of hotel that they want you to go look for? Or is it just, are people still wanting to go away and have meetings anyway?
I love this question. It's really important. And I think structurally, if you're doing a reimagination on your hotel or a renovation, you've got to look at how travelers travel now, right? So I think about the multi-million dollar renovation that went into the Sheraton San Diego. They just finished 2 weeks ago. There are networking vignettes, there are pods, it's light and airy. The restaurant that they had that used to be this big, huge restaurant, they actually have broken down into three. It's the same restaurant, but one part of it, there's a little private dining space, but it's open air. Another part of it are a bunch of little tables. The other part of it is more of like a networking stand-up thing. So I think you really, if you're reimagining something, you have to think about who is traveling and why they're traveling. And again, this distributed workforce creates this need to network. It's like you go to a meeting and the magic doesn't happen at the meeting, although everybody pours so much of the content. The magic happens at the base of the elevator, in the foyer, happens at the break, it happens at the bar, it happens. That's where that networking happens. So if you're reimagining your property, you've got to really think through that. You know, think about the $30 million renovation that just happened in Estancia La Jolla, where they completely opened up the lobby and they added a networking bar, but then they added a whole bunch of fire pits in the back, fire moments, fire features, a wishing tree. They're adding all these experiential things that not only are Instagrammable, but they also provide vignettes of places for people to gather. So I do think there is, you know, people's offices like your Samsung office. It's really important that that has a place, right? But at the end of the day, people still want to get out of their office, whether it's a co-work space or not.
Yeah.
And they also want the comforts of home. So not just structurally looking at how you're changing it for the, you know, the different people that are traveling, but the experiences, right? So this is something I've really seen. And it kind of goes back to the numbers, you know, the stats that we talked about, like the meeting numbers going down. I looked at those and the beverage was a lot lower, right? But how are we calculating beverage? A lot of times it's alcohol beverage. If you're under 30 and you're attending a meeting, you're not drinking. That's the biggest stat we're seeing in meetings right now is a lot of people are not drinking. And so if you have a hotel, work on your mocktail program, work on your non-alcoholic program. People will pay for that, but you've got to work on that. So I think how people are traveling, what they're doing. People also want to bring more wellness. Like they worked out through COVID, they got in the best shape of their life, and now they got to get back on the road. And they're nervous about changing their lifestyle. Like their lifestyle travels with them now. So you want to be a hotel or a venue or property that helps people bring their lifestyle with them. Like I think about Moxie properties, Moxie hotels, who have the cute little white, you know, whiteboard in there, and they're putting notes in there based on like what they see on your Instagram. You know, if they know you're a crazy spin fanatic, they're putting like the 3 different spin studios and where it's at on that board, like that personalization. So yes, like the WeWork spaces and the co-working spaces are meaningful. People still want to get out of their working
Yeah.
space. You don't have to match your hotel lobby to the Samsung office, but you do have to provide those creature comforts now, where before you could probably get away with some like very vanilla carpet and a whiteboard. Now, to be more attractive to travelers, you do want to really think through that traveler experience.
Yeah. And I think what it also shows as well is that I guess guests are now looking for experience, which we know, and that transcends into meeting and events, which is a pretty and in essence a pretty functional couple of days for people, but they still
Yeah.
want that experience. And I think within that, then banqueting tables and chairs don't necessarily cut it anymore, and it is about creating these other spaces, that breakout rooms, kitchenette areas, pods where people can go, and people are getting on with their lives now. And because everything's so remote, I kind of feel like now having podcast studio there where someone could go and do a quick podcast, especially if it's part of a conference, having breakout areas like the university seating where you could go and do, instead of going to breakout rooms that is just another banqueting table with chairs. It kind of feels that that whole conference experience now needs to be much more than just people turning up, going for breaks, going back into a seminar and coming out. And what you've kind of shown there as well is it's not necessarily just about the meeting and event space, but it's also what can you do in the hotel that can help people move through the spaces and give people reasons to share what they're doing as well. And I think that's a really important thing that sits within it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'll give you a couple examples because as you're saying this, it's reminding me of a couple unique properties. So the W Hotel in South Beach just renovated their ballroom. Now they don't have a ton of meeting space. I think it's like 4,500 square feet, But what they did to that ballroom was they rigged it electronically for the most beautiful, it's like a 3-walled LED experience. So it's immersive. You walk in there, and if you are doing anything interesting, if you are for Art Basel, for example, or you're doing anything interesting that you want to make sure that people see, there's a bunch of places in South Beach you're going to book, but nobody has a ballroom like this. And granted, it's a little bit smaller, but from a production value, the fact that they literally created their space to have this like triple level, very, very cool immersive experience is different, right? So I do think, like you're saying, podcast studio, heck yes,
Mm.
I love that. The other thing, it's not even just about technology, it's for what can we do on property that makes life easier for us, right? So I think about like the Caballo Ranch, or I think about Miraval or Canyon Ranch. Like they already have programming in place. So who can you hire on property to create programming, right? There's Canyon Ranch, for example, has they have like these really cool leadership series. And it's, how do you get healthy with your finances? How are you getting healthy with your P&L? How are you getting healthy with managing your team and helping them understand the budget? That's something that the hotel is bringing to them. And of course, they charge a little bit extra for it, but it's one less vendor you have to deal with, and it's makes it a little bit easier to buy. So make it easy for people to be on property and develop that programming as well.
That's a really important point. And I think it's back to that whole bit around that experience and people wanting extra and talking to them. And it's funny when you were talking about like the offices and how that works, it kind of feels like now you have to probably get to know the client and, as you say, build the relationship more than ever before. And
Yeah.
probably the best thing you could maybe do is go and say, instead of you coming to the hotel, why don't I come to your offices? And you go to the offices and see what environment they're in. Because if they then go to a different environment and it's lesser than what they have every day, you're already starting from a back foot, I guess. And what are some of those questions that your clients are asking you to go in? We want to book an event, whatever that might be, and we want to go away on a conference. What are some of the non-negotiables that they're asking you for when they're making bookings?
Yeah, I've seen a huge surge in food and beverage preferences. So dairy-free, gluten-free, vegan, vegetarian, paleo, the hotels and restaurants that do this easily and actually do it in a pretty way, in a tasty way, in a portioned right way are really nailing it. If you are still doing a vegetable Napoleon stack as your vegetarian option, you're gonna get left in the dust. So a huge surge of accommodating dietary and vegetarian needs. Natural light. I now more than ever people are at, because they're all stuck at home, not stuck at
Mm.
home, but everybody's working at home and people don't see the light of day. So people want natural light in their meeting spaces. So as you're renovating your meeting spaces, if you have the opportunity to add a window, add some natural light, or even in the foyer space, that's great. People are also asking for second and third tier cities. So Las Vegas is awesome. Orlando's amazing. I do a lot of great business in both those cities, but people want to give their attendees an experience they haven't had before. So they're asking me, like, what else is there? So I'm providing them a lot of swaps. So, instead of Miami, why not look at Tampa? Instead of Scottsdale, let's look at Tucson. Instead of Denver, let's look at Park City. So I think from a buyer side, being open-minded to the swap, from a seller side, providing those swaps, right? Whether it's on property swaps or whether if you're selling multiple properties, really cross-selling your other properties so you're aware, because people, they want to feel like people want their business. And some of those bigger cities right now are so slammed, they're so busy that there's a lot of disconnect between welcome to our city, please do business with us, versus like, I'm so slammed, I can't get back to you. It's going to take me a week. And these second and third tier cities are really crushing it right now because they're actually being hospitable.
Yeah.
They're curating, they're taking the time, they're helping people get back to each other.
That's a really interesting point, and I think yeah, and it's really valuable for those type of people to kind of move forwards and see what some of the bigger cities are doing and kind of help set that benchmark, which is really interesting. Now, one of the other bits that I think organizers, I guess, now are looking for a more personalized service. You've said that, but with everyone's talking about unreasonable hospitality right now, and quite rightly. And what are some of the things that you've seen in terms of best practice of people surprising and delighting the organizers or giving unreasonable hospitality? Because I also think there's an element now where what we did get in COVID and the pandemic was a whole sense of community. Obviously, that kind of partnership bit broke down, and I think now there's a real way to make a mark on people by just doing that little bit extra. Is there things that you've seen of hotels doing that, or experiences that you can share?
Yeah, I've seen a couple things, and it's two ways to look at the coin. So I think the first way is you got to train your staff. And as much as you want to curate for the customer, curate for your team. Your team is going to take care of the guest if you take care of them. And I think in hospitality, it's been far too long that operators haven't taken care of their team and they've had this expectation that the team deliver. And now the team's got a lot of options. They don't have to stay in the hospitality industry, they can go away. And I think guests can be jerks now more than ever, too, and have a lot more expectations. So I think it's even harder to be in the hospitality industry. So I think the first side of the coin is take care of your team. Don't wait for your annual performance review. Have weekly check-ins. Surprise and delight your team before you surprise and delight the guests, because they're the ones taking care of the guests. I also think if your team, you empower them to surprise and delight the guests, whether you say, okay, everybody's allowed to do one freebie for a customer every day. Take your pick on what that is. Just empower them to do things so they don't miss the moment. So I think that's one thing. Like, how are you taking care of your team? Your team that was with you through COVID, your team that came to you to the industry that they've never been in this industry before, like really, really taking care of the team. And then the curation side on the other side is like personalize, personalize, personalize. I was just at a hotel in Berlin last month. I had flown for a bazillion hours. I got in at 7 in the morning. My expectation was my room was not going to be ready. And not only was it ready, but the general manager was greeting everybody because he knew it's 7 a.m. And everybody had, they actually looked at the arrival manifests. They looked to see who was coming in. They personally greeted us. They had cold towels for us, just little things. You don't have to, and that wasn't a luxury property. Like, you don't have to do that all the time. I had another client who arrived to a hotel and she had a little, a throat, she was kind of coughing, and she's like, I promise I'm not sick. My voice is just gone. And her room wasn't quite ready. And then when her room was ready, a couple hours later, when she got to the room, they had put a pot of hot water, honey, and lemon in the room that just said, we hope that we can help you get better. Now, this isn't earth shattering. This is just keeping your antenna up, paying attention, and delivering a low cost, but high value experience to a guest who you're listening to. I had another experience where a customer had been traveling and on nonstop site inspections, and somebody on the admin team went in and looked up their Instagram or their Facebook and saw their dog and saw their family, and put pictures of their family in their room for them. Now, some might think that's creepy, but this particular customer loved it. And it said, you travel so much and we want you to have the comforts of home. So I really think like curating, making it personal, it's got to go beyond like a logoed dessert placard, right? It's got to go into asking the questions. And I will say a pet peeve of mine is when we're doing site inspections and hotels send you that profile document. Like, do not send me an attachment with 20 questions. I don't have time for that. Like, nobody has time for an attachment with 20
Yeah.
questions. I do have time for 5 quick questions in an email.
Mm.
I will answer that. My customers will answer that. And you can get personalization from there. But customers are so easy to track down now. Like, look at their last couple LinkedIn posts, or look at how people are making recommendations about them on their LinkedIn page. You can learn about what that customer wants quickly without putting it back on your customer to help you personalize it. So curate, personalize, take care of your staff, and really keep that antenna up so you can, listen while you're on property. And then the last thing is, like, it doesn't have to cost a lot, but empower your staff to do these types of
Mm.
things.
It's funny. I always remember back to hotels that I worked in, and I left hotels in 2015. But there was a common thing that we used to do every week, which was to go around the other hotels and look at the boards that were in reception or in the convention center, and look
Mm,
at who was booking events, and then the sales team would go and
the
target them, right?
reader board ritual.
The
Yeah, I did
reader
the
board,
same
right?
thing.
And
Yeah.
it's funny. I've been this close to doing a poll on LinkedIn just to see if it's still happening, but I wondered whether anyone had owned up to it. But it's back to that piece that I was going to say about salespeople being under pressure, dealing with clients that are booking big events that have got lots of logistics to take on. You're maybe a small piece of that. That whole bit around how you can spend time with them, you can understand what's important to them, you can really get to know them. And as you say, being on LinkedIn, being on places where they're sharing other events and things, having the time to be able to just go and research and get that information could be really valuable in terms of nailing not just that conference, but every other conference that person might book. And I just really worry around whether, because of manning and pressures, that ability to do that isn't necessarily there. And therefore, the clients become transactional and transient because of it. And I think what you're sharing there is basic care and attention can really make a big difference. Just having the GM there at 7 a.m. meeting you was probably something that 95% of hotels would never see, but that
No.
one GM felt it was important. And I think it's really crucial for that. I was speaking to a GM of a hotel last week on the show. And he was saying I always make sure I walk around the hotel to see the guests and to speak to them and make sure they know who I am and that I've recognized them for being there. And I just think when I spend time in hotels, probably as you do, people touching tables and going and speaking to guests feels like it's getting less and less, or it's not as important because there's maybe not the right people or number of people there. And I think it's a real strong message that you've given there to really show that that's something that really does have an impact on potential clients.
Yeah, and that whole table touching thing is like, don't send your junior AGM of the restaurant up to the table to be like, how's everything going today? Like, give them 5 questions that they can they're only going to ask one,
Mm,
but give them 5 questions, right? And like, just take how are you off the table.
yeah.
No one's going to be honest. Stop trying to extract that real honesty about how are you, and swap it out with, hey, what made you laugh? Or how has your travel been getting here?
Mm,
Or when you came to this restaurant, what were you hoping for? Like, there's so many questions you can ask. You only have to ask one. But if you're doing a table touch, don't go up to the table and be like, how's it going? It's going great. How are you? Nobody's going to answer you. And it becomes an odd interruption. But if you're coming to the table, you're bringing value by asking an interesting question, then you become a part of the experience. And I translate that to the sales experience too. If you want to move from a transactional hotel salesperson to a salesperson that actually has some value, you really, 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 number one, you've got to get on LinkedIn, and you've got to schedule time for yourself on LinkedIn. So you are actually asking questions, you're paying attention, and you're participating. So, I think number one, getting on LinkedIn, because that's where everybody is right now, is important. Scheduling time to engage is really important. But when you have that moment to engage, be ready with an interesting question, because
Mm.
that interesting question is going to build that deeper relationship. And you're going to learn so much more about your customer than asking, like, how are you? Or how's the weather? Those are such dumb questions. Like we have to hold ourselves to a higher accountability level right now with how we engage. Yes, we're engaging, but like, what is the quality of that engagement? And it doesn't take much. It really doesn't take much to just swap out some questions.
I think you'll probably see it as well is the amount of emails or DMs that you get in that are trying to sell you something. If you don't stand out from the crowd, then
Yeah.
you're not going to get the moment of the pie to be able to see how great it is. And I think that's a really good example. And I remember on a digital hospitality room once, I think you told us about how you do the cold outreach to people. Can you just share some of the secrets with that? Because I think, again, back to this whole thing of people are trying to hit targets quite a bit, maybe not utilizing LinkedIn as good as they can. I think there's some really cool lessons in that in terms of how to utilize it and try and build those relationships.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in a really powerful subject line. Take checking in or following up off the table, replace it with, have you heard or something fun. Why you got to be so mean? Like Taylor Swift's everywhere right now. Put a lyric in it. Make the first 10 words of your email compelling. Take, hi, how are you? Hope you're well. Best wishes. Take those off the table. Get right into it. I think how you interact with somebody and you really pay attention to those first 10 words. And I actually got that tactic from Erin King, who wrote a book called Digital Persuasion. And it was really, really good book. And she talks a lot about how to write better emails, how to write an email that people actually read. And let's face it, cold outreach right now is all emails. So like you utilize your subject line, utilize those first 10 words. If a customer has ghosted you, use a choose your own adventure email. It's one of my favorite tactics. In the subject line, it says, are you on an adventure? In the email, you got to know a little bit about the customer. So you got to do some research. But in the email, then give them multiple choice, like, hey, haven't heard from you in a while. I'm wondering if you're on an adventure. Are you having a beer at that pub in London? Are you B, at the barbecue for your alumni association? Are you C, on vacation with your kids? Or D, you've been thinking about interacting with me and my product, but you just haven't had the time. Whichever adventure you're on, I support you in all your endeavors. Let me know how I guessed. Like that is such a fun, the response ratio on that is great. Like the worst case scenario, somebody's going to respond back to you and say, not interested, but they're still going to remember you as creative,
Mm.
clever, and interesting. Best case scenario is they respond back and be like, oh, I thought I already responded to this. I'm so sorry. Here's some business. So I think we really have to get creative with our interaction and take some of the things we always do completely off the table. And don't be afraid to experiment, like if you're looking at interacting with somebody, I think I read somewhere, I think Salesforce just in HubSpot did a couple different studies recently where 80% of the business that is closed takes 5 or more follow-ups. So if we know that out of the gate, right? Then each follow-up needs to be interesting. You got to try a different tactic. You have to try email, phone call, text message, video, handwritten notes, whatever else you want to mix in there. But you can't just be sending 5 emails. You can't just be making 5 calls. You've really got to mix up your
Mm.
interactions and just know that the stats will support that if you're doing that consistently.
I think we're coming to the end of the show now. And I guess the last thing for me is in terms of your coaching side of what you do. And I've seen some of the videos and the energy looks amazing. You've shared some amazing tips today. Tell us more about kind of what these sessions entail or what they might cover. And because I'm sure there's people who are listening to this who think, actually, do you know, I just want to know a bit more. And I think it's a great opportunity just to share an inside view or behind the scenes of what a coaching session with Mandi looks like.
Oh, it's fun. We have fun. I get so much energy from the coaching sessions because when you put a group of people together on a screen or in person, a lot of times people think it's about me and the content, but it's not. It's about the osmosis and the prompting of people to share their stories and they're helping each other. So, a coaching session, I have like 6 or 7 topics that I talk about. It's having fun with follow-up, being more memorable in the marketplace, how to digitally dominate by getting more leads on social media. I have a super fun networking one that is all about networking in a new world, from circle crashing to the behind the screen, building relationships. And circle crashing is something anybody that attends a trade show or networking event needs to learn how to do. I created this like 3-step how to crash a circle thing. So my whole thing about my sales training, though, especially in groups of people, is that I don't believe in taking sales teams out of the office for the whole day or the half a day. I don't think that's relevant anymore. I don't think people have time for that. As a customer, I don't have time for my sales contacts to be out. I need information from them. As a salesperson, the worst thing you can do is hype them up, get them out of the office for this awesome training, and then send them back home to do a whole bunch of emails to catch up for the day. So I really believe sales training should be in digestible bites. It should be no more than 70 to 90 minutes. And if you've got to do 6 or 7 throughout the course of the year, then do that. But I like to pick one topic and we go really hard at that topic. My sales coaching is all about stories and stats. So I'll deliver a story, I'll give some statistics behind it, and then it's very interactive. So I'm asking questions. And a lot of times I go in and sometimes it'll be the chief sales officer or vice president of sales. They'll be like, well, if you need me to prime the pump with some questions, I can. I'm like, I appreciate that, but I guarantee they ask questions, and they do. They always do, because it is very interactive. And I am a customer, but I'm also a salesperson in the field too. So I'm one of them, right? And we're rolling our sleeves up. We're in this together. So the first part is very content focused. It's very interactive. And then the last part is truly coaching, rolling your sleeves up and answering live questions, like bring them. But I tend to like to stick with one topic for each session. And I don't like that topic to go any longer than 90 minutes, because I want people to go back to the office and try it. Like they leave my session with practical, tactical tips, because I want them to instantly try it. I don't want them to be like, remember that one sales trainer we had that taught us about this acronym, and then they never use it. Like I want them to leave with like 4 or 5 things they can use like that day on an email or internally with somebody on the ops team. And then the next time we meet, they can report back like, hey, I tried this, this worked, this didn't work. And then we're just building from there each time.
I think that's a really, really great format. And I think it's a way that, especially as you're saying, with people going back to the office and being able to use it, mastering that one technique and then coming back and mastering another, I think it's a great one. But I think what also they're getting when they do work with you is they get that client piece where you know what clients are asking for. So you're seeing it real life, but you've also know how they need to attack those requests because you've been on that side of the fence. And I think there's not many coaches that you get that's kind of seen that real life experience at the same time as well. And it just goes to show that kind of bringing in external resource that's seeing the market and experiencing the market can have a massive impact on the business, isn't it? And I think this is sometimes what, especially hotels, they try and keep everything internal. And I think sometimes bringing in that external mindset can help people do things differently and bring in experiences like you've shared on the show today. I think that's super important for your people to, if not experience it, at least hear it from others.
It's like with kids, like you can tell your kids as a parent something over and over and over again, but then like cool Aunt Mandy comes in and says the exact same thing, and somehow they're like, it's new, it's interesting. And I don't claim to be cool Aunt Mandy. I'm just saying, like, an aunt or an outside source or somebody else is repeating the same thing. And I literally just did this the other day. I was coaching a team of real estate agents, and we hung up, and the owner was like, Mandy, I have told them this exact same thing. Like, they probably think you're just parroting what I said. He's like, but for some reason they actually listen and they engage. I'm like, I'm not telling them anything different. It's just a different source. You hear the same thing from just a different source. It hits different for whatever reason.
That's so true. That happened to me
Yeah.
on Friday with my wife. And someone else told me what she's been telling for 4 weeks. And I walked downstairs and I told her what it was. And she went, I've been saying this to you for 4 weeks. I was like, really? Really?
Yeah,
It just
no.
kind of gone in one ear and out the other. So yeah, that did
know.
get me lots of brownie points, but we'll live to fight another day. Listen, Mandi, it's been awesome speaking to you. I knew this was going to be full of real gems for people. And if people do want to go and have a look at the coaching, or maybe they need some events booking, or maybe they want to work with you to get events booked, what's the best way to get hold of you?
I'm everywhere. So I have a website. It's Mandi Graziano, Mandi, Graziano with a Z, mandigraziano.com. You can go there, search me on LinkedIn, Mandi Graziano, on Instagram, Mandi_Graziano. Just Google Mandi Graziano and find me on one of those formats, and I'll DM me. I respond. I'm very responsive, and I love meeting new people and meeting new strangers, especially in our hospitality world. So reach out anytime.
For sure. And we just said off air that I'm going to be in San Diego as well in October, and can't wait to meet face to face and have a coffee and chat hotels. But Mandi, thank you very much for coming on the show. Really appreciate you spending some time.
Thank you for having me. This is great. And I just want to remind the audience, I know you're probably following Scott, but if you aren't, man, you've got some of the best LinkedIn engagement. I learn from you all the time. So just keep doing what you're doing, because you're inspiring all of us. We appreciate you.
Thank you. And have a great day. Thank you, Mandi.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Hospitality Huddles, brought to you by Auden Hospitality. If you want to see how we can help you think differently for your next F&B project, then learn more by visiting our website at audenhospitality.com. If you want to revisit clips from this or previous episodes, make sure you visit our YouTube channel at Auden Hospitality. Thank you for listening to the show, and see you next time.